Yes. Okay.
Well, comrades, you know, we are to have a discussion on Sri Lanka today, and we're really privileged to have Comrade Saranapala, you know, present with other comrades from Sri Lanka, comrades who've had extensive experience in workers' struggle in that country, and also many who have had a keen observation or direct participation in the struggle of Sri Lankan workers and peasants, and have fought against the rising tide of chauvinism, which turned into a brutal civil war, of which Sri Lanka is still trying to recover. Just a brief introduction, and I won't say more because we really do want to hear directly from comrades in the country. Sri Lanka's economy is now in free fall. From the bourgeois, we hear a solution is in progress. It'll take 5 to 10 years, and the slogan is pain, pain, and more pain before gain. And what gain is obviously, you know, for the rich and the elite and not for the ordinary people. But this is not an exception. Although Sri Lanka is exceptional, it's not an exception to the rule which is taking place, the forms of disaster followed by catastrophes, which are falling on many of the so-called emerging countries, which are no longer emerging and falling backwards. In other words, what we're seeing is falling currencies, rising food prices, shortages of fertilizer and increasing costs of that, rates of interest rising, non-accessible finance capital in foreign currency and so forth, and a radical polarization, extraordinary polarization between rich and poor now taking place. And, you know, so when we discuss, it's not really discussing all the particularities of Sri Lanka, of which there are many, and we want to hear directly all the texture, you know, from the comrades themselves, but to think more broadly about and more widely about how capitalism internationally is bearing down on the countries which were formerly colonized, you know, by the West and are struggling, you know, now for existence. So over to you, Saranapala. I think, you know, if you could speak directly whenever you need translation or you want to have translation, let's talk about that. I do think we have some facility. Is that right, Roger?
Well, I'm not sure about that, to be honest.
Okay.
No.
Well, look, we might have to ask for volunteers at that time. So if we can proceed in English, I apologize. You know, we do have those constraints, but we're very much looking forward to what you have to say. So over to you, Saranapala.
Yeah, comrade, I will give a brief to the discussion because I do not go further more details from the beginning of the struggle, but I like to say some current situation and how it comes today. The current crisis began with rising prices, the shortage of necessary consumer goods, food, medicine, gas, fuel, and as a result, power cut. At the beginning, there was no opposition from actually MPs, trade unions, and other organizations. It was only the non-politics youth came to the struggle. You know, all over the country, some groups, some places, and finally they came to the goal-face green. No one predicted these problems or the struggle which was to take place. To begin with, the struggle was led by the youth at Goal Green. A tent camp was set up outside the presidential palace under the slogan, "Gota, go home." But the camp regarded itself as non-political. But very shortly afterwards, the protest was joined by leftist parties, government ministers, the trade union federations, civil organizations, lawyers, NGOs, and day by day, the protest movement grew inside. A protest in Rambukana about the non-delivery of vehicle fuel, in which protesters blocked the main road, resulted in the police opening fire at the protesters, killing 2. Gota tried to suppress the struggle, holding a meeting with the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa on 9th May, at which he made a provocative speech to his supporters, which led to some of them attacking peaceful and unarmed protesters at Gold Green and destroying their tented village. This was followed by nationwide riots, in which 9 people were killed, including 1 MP, many assaults, and the burning of property belonging to the members of the Rajapaksa clan, and the burning of buses which had carried Mahinda supporters to Gold Green. A state of emergency was declared, and there were daily curfew, but this did not prevent the operations of the Gold Green or angry protesters, at which students were attached by the political with tear gas and water cannon. The trade unions called for a general strike, but this was soon abandoned. Mahinda then resigned along with many government ministers, notably Ali Sabri, the finance minister, and Gota's government became unstable. Gota then called on their other parties to produce a new prime minister, and there were no volunteers. The main opposition party, led by Sajid Premadasa, refused to work with what was left of the Rajapaksa government. And so Gota chose Ranil Wickremesinghe, who had already been 5 times the prime minister, from a majority opposition party. There was then no parliamentary majority, and it took 2 weeks for Wickremesinghe to form a cross-party cabinet. Now, all that government can do is to run to the IMF and loan sharks like China in an attempt to save themselves from the mess that has been created. Since then, power cuts have increased drastically, sometimes for up to 13 hours a day, apart from a short repressive while students took examinations. The cost of goods had doubled, and queues for fuel and cooking gas have increased in length, with many very angry and desperate people. Many people cannot follow their unemployment due to spending many hours a day queuing for fuel and do not have enough food. And many of those who do now have to cook over wood fires. But even torrential rain has not stopped the protest. Now, trade unions, left parties, and civil organizations such as lawyers are beginning fresh talks about the way forward. The Wien statement was well received. Now the call is becoming not just the populist to go home. It's a call for fair elections, the abolition of the executive presidency, the removal of Gota, and for power not just for the people, but for the working class. So this is a brief for the current situation. I think the comrades can contribute and get questions, and so then we can continue the discussion furthermore.
Okay, thanks so much for your contribution. As always, we call on comrades to come in with contributions and questions. Please would you indicate by going down to the reaction button there and pressing your hands up if you you want to do that, or otherwise maybe waving violently so I can see you.
Ian's got his hand up, David.
So
Stephen.
Oh, Stephen. Okay, Pam, I'm glad to see that you're with us. And please come in when you can. Stephen?
Okay, thank you. And thanks for Pam for noticing. Thank you. But more particularly, thanks to Roger and the Workers' International Network for organising the meeting. I wasn't able to get to the last one, too many bloody meetings to go to, but I did see the recording of it, and it was very helpful in setting the scene, as was today's meeting. I think the combination of the statement that was circulated and PD's description of how it has unfolded over the last, what, 7 or 8 weeks now, set the scene. And I'm sure we all agree on the severity and also the global significance of Sri Lanka as probably a development that we're going to see in a lot of other countries before too long, in the aftermath both of the pandemic, economic crisis, and now the war in Ukraine. So in a way, what we're discussing here, as I think David said initially, are issues and problems that are going to crop up in many countries. I suspect, therefore, this is the beginning of a discussion rather than something that's going to solve the problem straight away. The statement and PD's introduction, I think I would largely agree with the description of the situation, I'm sure. But there were some points in the statement that I think it's worth discussing further. And I'm not trying to make a polemic out of it. I'm interested to know how far advanced the development is in Sri Lanka, because the statement talks about the need for joint action committees bringing together trade union representatives, farmers, small business owners, plantation workers, currently unorganized workers, women's organizations, students, Tamil groups, Muslims, and other oppressed minorities. And I'm sure we all agree that all of those groups are entitled to democratic organization, and we would urge all of them, to organize themselves democratically to advance their interests. But surely our priority ought to be the stress on workplace organisation by workers. It seems to me everything else that opens up as a perspective in Sri Lanka, for example, as the statement says, the need to take control of essential functions over production and distribution, absolutely right. But you can't do that if you haven't got workplace organisation. And I think, whilst I agree that all the other groups certainly need to be organised, that's fine. But I think our stress ought to be on workplace and trade union organisation, because without that, nothing else can unfold, it seems to me. I think there's a danger of suggesting that all of this can be achieved quite quickly. The statement says, all that is needed is to link up these informal manifestations of dual power into an executive organ of revolution, which gives the impression that this is something that's immediately on the agenda. And I'm pretty sure it isn't, although I wish it were. So one question really to PD is whether there are any examples of local organizations that have the capacity to develop into control organizations and the basis of democratic organization for the working class. I think there's many of the left groups, of course, are calling for such committees. But when I've been in Sri Lanka in the past, talking to lots of different groups, my impression is that very often what they really mean is local organizations of their own supporters and their own members. And I think we have to go way beyond that kind of perspective to organizations of workers in workplaces. Obviously, the members of the left groups will be arguing for that, but they shouldn't try and shortcut it by setting up their own committees. I think that's a mistake that has been made too often in the past. So it'd be very interesting to hear from PD what progress has been made on that front. I think the perspective that is outlined in the statement is generally correct, but I do think it needs to be understood that this is a crisis that is going to last for a very long time, and this is something we have to fight for over months and months. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks, Stephen.
Can I comment answer to Mac?
Well, I wonder if we could let the ball roll a little bit. Let's have a real game of football here. Well, not political football, but let the discussion warm up a little. Pam, would please make a note, Saranapala, or maybe I'll help remind the question. Pam, would you like to come in now?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to let Saranapala comment as we go along, if we can do that. But I'll just make a few comments. First of all, I'd like to really welcome the comrades from Sri Lanka that are here. We've actually got 5 comrades from Sri Lanka, as far as I can see, which is fantastic. I was going to ask more or less the same question as Stephen, really. What are the developments within workers at the moment, within the trade union movement? I think Stephen is right. This is not going to be solved immediately. It's going to go on for some time. And I think it is an indication of the trend in the world. This is going to be happening everywhere fairly soon in one form or another. Just the question I wanted to ask is about the attitude of the youth. The youth have been leading the protests at Gold Green in Colombo. It seems to be sort of dominated by students who have played quite a leading role in the protests. What I wanted to ask Saranapala is, what is the attitude? What does he think the attitude of the youth is? Do they think that Sri Lanka's problems can be sorted out under the present government or not? So that's my question.
Okay. Saranapala, would you like to come back on those 2 key questions? I think the first was, how local organizations are developing, or, what the perspective is for that to take place. And the other more specifically on the role of the youth, particularly in the Colombo group, which apparently has been the cutting edge of mass protests. Over to you.
Yeah. Can I make some point?
Sure.
You know that Comrade Mac made some questions. From the beginning that I explained, there were any trade unions or political parties predicted the situation, and first 2-3 days, no any other organization participated in the struggle. So then, however, there are 2 centers, the trade union centers. One centers led by JVP, another centers led by Frontline Socialist Party politically. So that JVP trade unions, and they say their slogan is, "Go Gota, form a new government, dissolve the parliament, and have a fair election." That was the slogan by the JVP. But the Frontline Socialist Party, we also represent this front. And we say, Gota, go home. So now this is the Frontline Socialist Party says, power to the people, but we say, power to the working class. But you know that now, both parties now Especially the AVP front, trade unions and some civil organizations, they were meeting all over the district and continue the campaign to dissolve the parliament, have an election. So then we are having discussions and meetings. Dissolve the parliament and people to the power, and it's a mixed the working class. Sometimes they say the people to the power. Sometimes they say it's because our contribution, the power to the working class. That is the situation. But now we can see that the middle class, from the beginning, there were a lot of middle class participation in the discussion and the struggle. But now we can say that the middle class, the lawyers association and some NGOs and the monks and the fathers organizations, now they are trying to get the reformist from this government, under the Prime Minister of Ranil. So they ask the reformist means, they want to amend the 20th amendment of the executive presidency to cut the power and amend the constitution, remove the 20th amendment and again occupy the 19th amendment. They abolish, when they get power, the Gota get power, they abolish the 19th and they introduced the 20th amendment. And now the middle class and especially the lawyers association and some intellectuals and the art people and sport. There's a lot of mixed middle class organizations. They are trying to get reformist under the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. But now we can see three parts of the gang, are working in the struggle, and at the same time, the people, so they can't tolerate. So now today also they increase gas, 6,800 rupees today. Now it is very unfortunate situation for the poor people, low income people. So it may be another riots, I think. So because now we can see it's not organized riots, but the queue, there are a lot of queues in the country, the fuel and the gas and the commodities and everything. Another thing is the fertilizer problem. So this season, so the farmers are waiting for the fertilizer, but government failed to sufficient to provide the fertilizer. So then the farmers also are crying and coming to the street and have some agitation. So it's a complicated situation in the country, but actually this is we can predict it, the revolutionary situation. But unfortunately, there is no the nuclear, at even a nuclear organization in Sri Lanka. That was the mistake and problems of the past left. Their perspectives and attitude, because they did not hope this type of struggle will come, and they couldn't predict it. This. So as we are a very small group, we are working and trying to explain the people, but we have no enormous power in the country. So we are only a few groups, but we made the real ideas and statements for the people. It's actually it is a revolutionary situation, because Ranil can't now. Last 2 weeks, he tried, but we can see now Ranil also failed, and because now before he come to power, he says his attempt is to give the three meals for the people, but now yesterday he announced ready to get 2 meals. So it is that of the situation in the country. It is very bad, and the people are coming, but no proper organization, no clear leadership for the people. So that's true that Mac proposed to the working class committee in the workplaces That is the solution for the struggle. So now we are also having some district-wise meetings. Our name of our organization is trade unions and the mass organizations. Then other, JVP center's name is Trade Union Coordinating Center. So the both centers are working. But in our centers, we have enough and strong union, especially the bank, telecom, and civil administration. So the thing, but all the leaders are far reformist, because now yesterday we had a discussion. So we pointed out that the IMF World Bank is coming again. So they will propose to the every government institution to privatize, definitely, because otherwise the Ranil wants to do that. So, but they are trying to save their sectors, the banks, the state bank center, because they did not agree to put forward the reject IMF proposals, because we want to put it forward for the slogan, but they did not agree with us. But personally, we included it our pamphlet, but a common pamphlet they did not agree to put the reject the IMF World Bank proposals, because a lot of people, because the feeling of the people now, they think the Ranil will get some subsidy from the World Bank and IMF. So there are a lot of blindly. The people think that they can get some support from IMF and World Bank. But we know the situation. But the thing is, so this is the situation. Always then tomorrow and tomorrow also we are having a discussions, because we couldn't reach a proper solution and proper demands the things. But actually, the organization I mentioned, that the bank, telecom, and the civil administration organization, normally the teachers organization also. So they say that they do not agree to make some political demand. That the working class power, and the thing is that the reject of the IMF and World Bank proposals. So that they are bounded to, because they were afraid if IMF and World Bank refuse to support the Sri Lanka, the people will die. That is their mentality. But we know the situation, and as a revolutionist, we are contributing the discussion, but it is not a more powerful contribution within the trade union front. But however, we are separately, we printed pamphlets within our organization. So what the perspectives we had, and we are working on that basis. I think the comrade can give some points.
Okay, many thanks for those responses, PD. Comrades, other contributions and questions? I've got an Ian. I can't quite see you. I don't know if you can appear or not.
Hi.
But...
Hi.
Yeah, you can.
I'd just like to ask a quick question about this new, or maybe not so new, Prime Minister that they've appointed. That I think either the email called him shop soiled, which is a good word for him, really, as well as being a 5-time incumbent. I think he stood for president as well previously, more than once, and lost more than anybody else has lost to presidential election in Sri Lanka. I think last time he didn't even get the nomination of his own party, of which he's the leader, and the majority of which then broke away. And it's gone down from being the main centre-right conservative party in the country to a parliamentary party of one. So what I'm really wondering is, appointing this very unpopular, isolated, discredited guy, is it Gota trying to stay in. It's almost like in the 70s. So it was a famous magazine cover. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew, and it was like, with this guy standing behind me, no one will shoot me down. Is that the plan by Gota? And do you think there's any chance that it will work?
Okay, thanks, Ian. Dominic, did you have a question or a contribution?
Well, John, yeah, I've got a brief contribution. Last week on Al Jazeera, there was an item dealing with Pakistan, and the item was largely around the fact that Imran Khan had heavily subsidized fuel prices, and this was seen as very popular in Pakistan, and the position is one that the Pakistan government have got to go to the IMF to get loans to keep the country going, and their demand on the Pakistan government was that they had to get rid of the subsidies on petrol. First of all, there was a 20% increase in the price of petrol, and now there's another 17% increase on the price of petrol. And in this piece about Pakistan, they questioned the correspondents and asked the correspondents, various questions about, what was the score with the military, what was the score with the general consensus of opinion in Pakistan. And the correspondent said that she saw the situation in Pakistan as mirroring that of the situation in Sri Lanka, that the whole of the country was going to the dogs. There was a mixture of corruption at the very top. And when the subsidies came in to help the working class, those were the subsidies that the IMF and the World Bank were keen to get rid of. I mean, we know from the history of, what used to be called the Third World, that free education, free health services were the top of the agenda for the IMF to get rid of when they give loans to African, Asian, and South American countries. So it's just if there is any links, because we have comrades in Pakistan and comrades in Sri Lanka, if there is any discussion going on as to what could possibly be done jointly, and where, the comrades themselves actually saw whatever similarities there might be between Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So I'll leave it at that, comrades.
Okay, thank you there, John. I think maybe if you'd like to come back on some of the questions about the perspectives, for the Prime Minister. Obviously, the 20th Amendment, rebalances, if it's carried, would rebalance all bourgeois politics and the constitutional arrangements towards more Bonapartist rule. And I wondered, whether we're going to see a living government or whether there'll be a set of paralysis. Maybe you'd like to come back on the perspectives for government. And maybe any of the other Sri Lankan comrades who are joined in would like to come in too. You're on mute right now, Saranapala. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true that the present Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe failed in history, and he lost several elections. And he couldn't actually he couldn't maintain his party also. That now the United National Party was the traditional party in the bourgeoisie from the beginning, actually, that since after the independence, so-called independence. So then, however, he made a trick to develop his party, I think, because he doesn't want to make a country develop, and also he wants to make a tie with the USA, imperialist USA, the thinking pattern, because normally the people understand and understood and understand he's always from he's with America, that what the American wants, and he's doing he's a puppet of America, so USA, and now he says the things he wants, and we can see he act his own agenda, and it may be clash. It may be clash of the majority of the parliament, because he's one of a MP from United National Party. He has no any power in the parliament, but always he depend on others. We can't see that he will succeed within the parliament, because now we can see next 2-3 weeks will come up the crisis again, because that the Rajapaksa's clan made conspiracy and make some critic against Ranil Wickremesinghe. So we don't think that he will succeed, and he also will fail in the coming period. I think that is our analysis. Is he can't go ahead. It is very the positive situation in Sri Lanka to the left. Unfortunately, the left also do not have the proper perspective for the country, the oppressed people. So that was the problem, because sometimes the frontline Socialist Party also comment abolish the presidential election, and reduce the prices, remove the IMF and World Bank proposals, and turn to the progressive bourgeoisie, like that. They have no clear perspective from the frontline Socialist Party also. But the discussion is going on well, and as I said, that the situation is actually the revolution situation. And so that our task is discuss with the rank and file comrades, the organization led by those the trade unions and the political parties, and we make the proposal. So the power to the working class. Then sometimes we can start some places the discussion. How do we get the power? What was the structure? What is the structure we proposed? And the things, as the comrade explained, that the committees of the workplaces, especially that they can when we proposed it, some organizations of in our front also, they said that they are not agree these type of slogans and the proposals for their members to the workplaces. But we said we have no members in your workplaces, but our proposal that normally you will get the leadership because they are the members. A lot of members are in bank union and others unions. We are very few people. We have no, we can't control the committees. But however, the workers are allowed to decide what do we want now, and how do we continue the struggle. Allowed to decide to the workers. That was our slogan. So that is I think enough the facts.
Okay, comrades, thank you for those responses. Any other comrades, particularly any other Sri Lankan comrades? We'd so welcome your participation.
Yeah, Deva. Deva Krishna. You want to make some comments, Deva?
Well, it's wide open, and we'd welcome you. Yeah.
You can use I will try. Yeah.
සහෝදරයා මම
okay.
15 minutes දෙන්න මම බස් එකේ ඉන්නේ. දාලා මම කියන්නේ.
Deva is wants to come to the discussion after 10 minutes.
Okay, that's great. It seems like he's and somewhat of a whirlwind there. Hope the line is a bit clearer. Okay, other comrades?
Shakti, do you like to make some comments? So you also can comment because you can speak English and you can ask questions and comments and contribution. Shakti. Sena. Hello. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, while we wait, and please, comrades, start putting your hand up whenever you can. Roger, would you like to contribute?
I didn't want to come in yet, but since there's a bit of a pause, I'd like to make a couple of points. First of all, well, comrades talked about the danger of Bonapartism. This is nothing new. There's been a constant attempt by the ruling class to impose dictatorships in the course of the last 40 years, more than 40 years. In the late 1970s, there was the election of the Jaya Jayawardena government, which did impose a new constitution. As a matter of fact, they've had new constitutions like every few years. There was a joke. I used to visit Sri Lanka in those days, in the 70s and 80s particularly, and there was a standing joke when somebody went into the government official bookshop and said, can I have a copy of the Sri Lanka Constitution? And the answer was, sorry, we don't stock periodicals. And J.R. Jayawardena, when he came to power, imposed quite a formidable authoritarian constitution, which was the immediate gave the immediate impetus to the general strike of 1980, which was a huge movement. It was a movement in which Comrade Saranapala, who was a young trade union leader at the time, played a very big and very important role. And unfortunately, although it was a heroic uprising, it led to a defeat. And it was really a direct and indirect consequence of that defeat that you had all the barbarism and the horrors and the civil war and the massacres and the bloodshed of the period since then. I mean, although that was not the first time, there had been insurrections on the part of the JVP, which though it had a radical kind of aura to it, nevertheless was an entirely communal-based organization based only on the Sinhala youth, that it was actually largely directed against the Tamils, who were seen to be a kind of privileged stratum, because the Tamils had been used, like the Asians in East Africa, for instance, as a kind of separate caste to be used for bureaucratic tasks and so on. And that was the background to the, or part of the background to the civil war, which then later developed between the, for the separation of the Tamil area in the north. And of course, we had the most horrific bloodshed. And the regime, of course, of the Rajapaksa family, and particularly of Gota, who was the military commander at the time, is absolutely a bloodthirsty role. I mean, they suppressed the Tamil uprising in the end, although it took them 30 years of bitter civil war. But they suppressed it in the end with a complete bloodbath and the enslavement, really, of the Tamil population. But the remember, again, comrades talked about the crisis in Pakistan and the crisis in India, and we've seen, of course, huge struggles, particularly in India. We mention this every time, but let's constantly remind ourselves of this because it's completely elbowed aside in press reports. There's not a mention of it it's not known in the consciousness of people, even of politically developed people around the world, that we've had general strike after general strike after general strike in India involving 250 million people. Strikes of an absolutely colossal size, biggest movement in the world, representing a large proportion of the world working class and of the world population. In this situation, the whole of the subcontinent is completely on the boil. And there's comrades here from other parts of the subcontinent who can tell us more about that. But the difference in Sri Lanka is that you did have, and there is embodied, although it's now largely overlaid and suppressed, but nevertheless, there's a tradition of conscious revolutionary Marxists, of Trotskyism in Sri Lanka. The first mass party of the working class in Sri Lanka, the Lanka Samasamaja Party, was a consciously Trotskyist revolutionary party. It was the main party of the Sri Lankan working class for a period. And in fact, its leaders had learned Marxist theory largely in London in the 1930s from the Trotskyists who were based here at the time. And in fact, they played a big part in the general uprising of the whole subcontinent. They played a big part. The leaders of the Lanka Samasamaja Party played a big part in India in the freedom struggle as the left wing of the liberation movement there. And when independence was achieved in Sri Lanka, there was a mass workers' party, the LSSP, which then tragically went the way of so many parties in isolation that they joined in a Popular Front government, which ended up with actually betraying the working class. And actually, the first JVB uprising came as a reaction against the broken promises and the disappointments of the Popular Front government, for which the LSSP paid a major responsibility. But going to the situation now, I mean, obviously those traditions for a period during that Popular Front government and even before, there was reforms that were brought in Sri Lanka, which were way beyond anything in the rest of South Asia. You could say that briefly, Sri Lanka was almost like the Sweden of South Asia, with a free health service, with free education right up to university level, and with all kinds of other such reforms. But it was the betrayal, as I say, and the concessions made by the reformists of the time, which then led to what really began the descent into the abyss of barbarism that we've seen in the period since, of the just unbelievable bloodshed and horrors and betrayals. So nevertheless, those long buried traditions are not completely destroyed. The embers are still there, and that was seen by the reaction to this crisis now. As we know, a few weeks ago, there was a decision made by 2,000 trade unions. They're largely workplace-based. That's why there's so many unions. But 2,000 came together and called for a general strike, and not just a token general strike or a warning or a gesture, but an indefinite general strike until the downfall of the regime and particularly the downfall of the president. Now, they've retreated from that. Obviously, they didn't have the perspective and the stamina to see that through to a conclusion. but nevertheless, it is a little echo of those traditions that are there. And when it was in that context that we produced our statement, which was to say, yes, a general strike, but nevertheless, at the same time, though the working class is the most conscious, the most organized element in society, it's a minority in society still, and it has to take the rest of the working population with them too. And that's the reason why, Stephen quoted it, why in a statement we did say that it's necessary not only to call the indefinite general strike, but to issue an urgent public appeal for the immediate formation of joint action committees, bringing together trade union representatives with farmers, small business owners, plantation workers. I haven't said anything about that, but they're a completely different element in the population, super oppressed, super exploited. Those workers that are currently unorganized, women's organizations, student organizations, that all the Tamil, what's left of the Tamil organizations and groups, the Muslims and other oppressed sections of the population, in order to bring them all together. And that's in the tradition of, it has very good antecedents. The Russian Revolution, in the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks did not just call for the workers to take action, but the workers leading the Soviets, which would bring together representatives of the workers, but also of the soldiers, who were really the organized youth of the peasantry, who were in the garrisons in Petrograd and in other locations, and to bring together, in other words, all the oppressed strata. And to have a program also, which was not just a program for workers' rights, but also for the breakup of the landlords' estates and the land to the peasantry. And I think it's in that tradition that it was right to say that the working class or a socialist program can bring together all the oppressed strata, and has to have an explicit program bringing them all together behind the banner of the revolution. And I would finally say, absolutely, the comrades in Sri Lanka, I know that they have made attempts to make contacts in India and in Pakistan. And of course, we have with us two comrades who are based in Bangladesh now from Myanmar. And I mean, to have all of these comrades must have a common program and a common platform, and insofar as is possible, to have some kind of common links, organizational links, in order to take the movement forward. All I would say in the end is, it's true in one sense what Stephen says, that it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's not the right way to say and to put our program to say, oh, it's all very complicated, it'll take a long time. It's a very, very, very simple program. And what we need to say, we have to give courage, if you like, to the comrades. Not saying our comrades, they have ample courage, but I mean they have to broadcast that courage to the elements who would call that general strike, that indefinite general strike, to say, power is in our hands. Power is potentially in our hands. We can take Sri Lanka forward and, in fact, give a lead to the whole of the working class of the subcontinent if we take these steps and bring the rest of the working population behind our banner. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Roger. If please, other comrades, please indicate. Pam, would you like to come in again?
Sorry, I'm on a strange computer finding the controls. Just a couple of questions that struck me is whether the crisis in Sri Lanka is bringing the groups in the past together that were separated because of the civil war. Are Muslims and Sinhalese and Tamil now reuniting behind a common banner? And has that done anything to heal the damage that's been done during the civil war and afterwards? And just the other question is, what is the attitude of the rank and file police and soldiers who have been put onto the streets to basically attack workers' demonstrations? Do comrades think the soldiers have sympathy with the demonstrators, and what about the police? I know at least one policeman was arrested for being heard to sympathise with the sympathisers or with the protesters on one particular demonstration. And I'm just wondering if the comrades in Sri Lanka have any insight or any ideas into how they are seeing things.
Thanks, Pam. Stephen, I see your hand. I just want to just keep the discussion a little open. If one of our Sri Lankan comrades could be tempted to come in. I don't know if we could get one or two other comrades to come in for now, Saranapala.
Very happy with that, of course. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I understand. You are on the list. You're not discarded. Well, look, just maybe before you come in, Stephen, I'd like to pick up a little on the debate. And please, other comrades, please do not feel inhibited. Please put your hands up. First of all, this question.
David, sorry to interrupt. I think Saranapala wanted to respond. He's just unmuted himself. Am I correct? Were you trying to come in then? Sorry to butt in, David.
Saudara?
Oh, yeah.
Oya translation කරන්න පුළුවන්ද?
ඔව් පුළුවන් කියන්න.
හරි. මම දැන් තමයි බස් එකේ එන ගම තමයි මට කතා කරන්න බැරි වුණා. ඒකයි. දැන් බැස්සා. මේමයි දැන් ලංකාවේ ලංකාවේ දැන් තියෙන තත්ත්ව උඩ දැන් අපේ දැන් ඒක ඇත්තම මේ මෙච්චර කාල අවුරුදු 72 years එක තියෙන ධනපති ක්‍රමය තමයි දැන් මේක ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. මේක
Could we pause just for a bit of translation?
So may I make a few translation?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that last 72 years now it is come to an end, the bourgeoisie and capitalist system in Sri Lanka, because you know that the bourgeoisie administration is failed now. Now we can see. Okay.
Then ඒකට පස්සේ දැන් අපිට මේ කාලේ යනකොට දැන් අවුරුදු 30යි අපි යුද්ධේ වෙලාව ලොකු economy crisis එකේ යන්න ක්‍රමයක් වුණා. ඒකත් අමතරව රාජපක්ෂලා ආව පස්සේ රාජපක්ෂලාගේ මේ වැරදි අනිත් එක හොරකම් එක්ක ලංකාවේ ඉක්මනට මේක මේ සිද්ධියත් වුණා.
Yes, you know, in between the 72 years, we faced the war, the last 30 years. And after the war, so that the people in the South were expecting the development in the country, but there were nothing. So then I'll explain. The thing is, this is not the collapse of the you know, voluntarily, but the Rajapaksa family made a lot of corruptions and the robbers and everything. That was so the situation came soon.
මේක තමයි දැන් ඒගොල්ලෝ ආයි බලයට එන්න ක්‍රමයක් ගත්තා. බොරු දේශප්‍රේමීය බොරු ජාතිවාදී බොරු මේක උඩ අරන් තියෙන බලය තමයි මේ කට්ටිය අවුරුදු දෙකමාර ඇතුළ ඒ විනිමේ මා ජාතිය විනිවින් ඒගොල්ලෝ පොලිම් එක පත් කරලා තිබුණා ඒගොල්ලෝ හොරකම් නිසා.
You know that I want to say something about how they got powers. They said the Sinhala Buddhist, so only Sinhala Buddhist regime. They organized the temples and incumbents in the country. So that was the tragedy in Sri Lanka. But it shows within 2 years, they failed, and all the people suffered. The more suffered and suffered. Now we are facing a lot of troubles in the south and north both.
අපිට තියෙනවා දැන් ඒක අමතරව north east ඉන්න තැමිල් කට්ටියට පොඩි මේකක් තියෙනවා. අපි අවුරුදු 30යි මේ යුද්ධයට මුහුණ දෙනකොට මේ අපි economic threats එකට ඒකට මුහුණ දෙන්න තිබුණා. ඒක අමතරව බඩු අතන තානම් කරලා තිබුණා අපේ ඒරියා එකේ එන්න. ඒ වගේ ලොකු සල්ලි වලින් තමයි උදාහරණ කිව්වොත් petrol 2500 එකට අපි ගත්තා. ඒ වෙලාවෙම අපි එච්චර ඒ experience නිසා දැන් මේ තියෙන තත්ත්වයට මුහුණ දෙන්න පොඩි මේ උවමනාවක් තියෙනවා.
Yes, I like to tell comrades. So the last 30 years, we faced a lot of grievances. The prices of the goods, especially normally now, I want to say that now still in the southern area and in the country, the diesel, so they are getting near less than 500. But we bought it 2,500 at that period. So now I want to compare this, and also that our people, north and east, they are ready to face these the grievances because they met it last 30 years. So that was the problem in this situation. Still, the north and east people do not involve these struggles, maturity, but only few means, that like our organizations, we are also very few organizations in the north, but we are campaigning and we are explaining the Tamil community of the struggle. Okay.
ඒක නිසා තමයි දැන් මේ තියෙන අරගලට hello
yeah okay
දැන් තියෙන අරගලට අපිට අපේ පැත්තේ ඉන්න කට්ටිය තාම මේ full support එක දීලා නැතුව ඉන්නේ. එකයි ඒදුව එක මේක අපි ඉස්සරහා මුණදින් තියෙන එකක්. දෙවෙනි එකක් තාම දකුණු එකට ඉන්න සමහරු අතන කැම්පේන් එකේ ඉන්න කට්ටිය තාම අතන ජාතිවාදී නැති වෙලා ඒක නැති කියලා තාම සැකක් තියෙන නිසා අපි මේ තව මේ කැම්පේන් එකට මේ උතුරු කට්ටිය තාම මේ ලොකුවට බාර දීලා නැහැ.
But north and east people are thinking, the strugglers also, they are using the national flag, and sometimes their slogans, they are using some racist slogan. So therefore we are afraid to come to the struggle because sometimes we have no clear idea and we have no fearless idea.
Mama ekak
yeah Udeva
mama then mama කෙටියෙන් මට මේකක් තියෙනවා දැන් රාජපක්ෂලා දැන් අලුත් රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ දාලා දැන් ලොකු මේක ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉස්සරහා දාලා මේගොල්ලෝ බේරලා තියෙනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ දැන් තියෙන තත්ත්ව උඩ බේරලා මොනවාරි ගමනක් යන්න පුළුවන් කියලා හිතනවා. හැබැයි මේක බෑ රාජපක්ෂලාට ඒක බැරි වෙනවා රනිල්ට ෆෙයිල් වෙනවා. ඒක අමතරව දැන් තම IMF එකට යන එකක් සමහර කට්ටිය මේක පිටිපස්සේ ඉන්න මධ්‍ය පාන්ති කට්ටිය IMF එකට යන්න හොඳයි කියලා කියනවා. ඒක මාර බරපතල මේ ලංකාවේ තව බරපතල එකකට මුහුණ දෙන්න එනවා.
Yeah. You know that Rajapaksa family try to use Ranil as a shield and try to change the situation. Then sometimes they will come up again. And also the solutions that Ranil proposed is the IMF and World Bank. It make the heavy austerity for the people. So we can't hope that support the coming period from this government.
තව මට පොඩි මේ ඒක අමතරව අපිට දැන් තියෙන තත්ත්වයේ මේ තව යන මේක වර්ධනය වෙනවා මේ කැම්පේන් එක මිනිස්සු පීඩාවට පත්වන මෙතන තියෙනවා පොඩි මේකක් ජූනියන් සමහර ජූනියන් එක ඉන්න ලීඩර්ස්ලා ඒගොල්ලෝ අතන තාම දැන් මේක අතන negotiation setup එකේ ඉන්න එකක් තව වාමාංශීය සයිට් එක එකතු වීම පොඩි මේ හොඳ ස්ථාවර නැති නිසා දැන් මෙතන අපි ලොකු කැම්පේන් එකට ලොකු බරපතල මේකට යන්න පොඩි පසුබිමක් තියෙනවා.
I can see some obstacle because the left, as so-called left trade union leaders and so-called left parties, they are still trying to mobilize for their own goal, not for the people grievances or the people opinion, but they are going against the people opinion and try to establish their parliamentary politics. So that was another obstacle for going the struggle going the forward.
Okay. ඒක අමතර දැන් අපි දැන් ඉදිරි කාලේ අපි ලංකාවේ අවුරුදු මාස 8යි හරි මේ අවුරුදු අන්තිම හරි ඉඳලා ලොකු මිනිසු මුණ දෙන්න ඉන්න අර ආගාරාරම මේකට ඒකට විසඳුම ඒක පස්සේ ලොකු කරලෙක් වෙනවා. ඒකට ලීඩර්ෂිප් යන්න ජූනියන් වාමාංශීය හට්ටිය දැන් ඒක තිබුණොත් ඒක ඉස්සරහට අපි මේක දිනන්න පුළුවන් කියලා අපි අදහස තියෙනවා. ඒක එච්චරයි.
I believe the trade union leaders and the left leaders wants to get ready to face the people uprising the next 3-6 months because there may be scarcity of foods in the country. The people will come up and streets to the riots. So then if we fail to give the leadership for the people who are come to the street and struggle, so maybe the counter-revolution will come and smash the people's movement. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that contribution. Some marvelous details. Stephen, I wonder if I could have your indulgence and allow myself from the chair to have a few words. And then please, you are next on the list.
You're in a good position to do that. That's fine.
Okay, well, just for the moment. Could I make some points, which I'm speaking to some of the notes which I put out in an email shortly before the discussion and some concrete details which, showed quite an appalling level of decline of living standards. In those notes, I found that one of the tea pickers, a woman tea picker, used to collect 35 kilograms of tea a day. And I'm not sure quite what the reward was in rupees. Now she is restricted to 10 kilograms a day. In other words, her income has declined by 2/3, and the rate at which they paid has also declined. What I didn't realize is that I thought that there were vast tea plantations owned by monopolies. Apparently, a lot of the tea plantations, as in India, are owned by relatively small groups, and these people have their backs to the wall. In India, I've visited tea plantations and found that the conditions for the workers are appalling. They're so appalling that traditionally tea pickers are now being displaced by immigrants from the most poorest provinces around India to come and do the picking. And the reason is that when you do tea picking, they prefer you to pull by hand, not with scissors. And at the end of the day, your hand is quite raw from picking tea. You wouldn't imagine it's a problem. I didn't find it a problem picking 1 or 2 leaves, but imagine 35 kg of tea picking of tea leaves. Each leaf is quite light. So imagine, the burden on people. So there's that. There's intense poverty and misery, in the tea plantations. In the urban areas, they're talking about people only having 1 meal a day now. And for the taxi drivers, having to queue for 3 or 4 or 5 hours and not necessarily getting any fuel to be able to earn some money. So the devastation is quite immense. And this is the point I wanted to carry through, is that there is no relief on site. In other words, you're quite right, it's 5 to 10 years of misery on a capitalist basis, unless the working class organizes itself and does something. It's not a matter of waiting for an upturn, because that is almost indefinitely postponed. The reason is political in this sense, that the IMF will not provide a loan to Sri Lanka, and everyone agrees that IMF is critical to getting loans. Even the Chinese will not just dish out money on the basis of a promise. They want what they call credibility. Credibility means that you pay your debts at some time or pay part of the debts. The only way you can pay the debts is by increasing the misery on the working class. But the IMF is not foolish enough to roar itself in. I've been going through their documents, and they're saying that they cannot intervene, until there is a stable government. And that, as you see, is very problematic. Maybe that's why the 20th Amendments come, so that there could be some assertion of power from above. And B, there must be some social safety net. Now, we know that's pathetic indeed, but they don't want to come into the and provide a loan and then find that there is the uprising, which our comrade has just predicted in 3 to 5 months, that the entire regime is then pulled down again. The IMF's engaged in getting money back, their loans and then the money back, but they're also engaged in propping up regimes. That's what's going on. So what they're doing, and what Gota seems to have succeeded in part, is to get the bourgeois party split and to get some of them to say, well, we don't like you, but since we've got to get an IMF loan to get any other loan, we then have to support you, and we have to support this shop-soiled prime minister who promises to bring a sinking ship into the harbor. That's the phrase that I've heard. In other words, the ship is sinking, but he could get it to the harbor, it could then be fixed. That's the promise, and they say it would take a minimum of 5 years on a capitalist basis, with all the, the nice things that IMF loan could bring. In other words, to bring some fertilizer, some fuel, at least to do that. But even then, it would take another 5 years of zero growth or misery, to get any kind of stability. Now, what does the working class? I pose this question. The second question, what's the alternative to the deepening misery under capitalism? Now, it seems now we have a political crisis of a kind, even on the left, because sections of the left are peeling off to join the bourgeois parties, to join the prime minister and to stabilize government. Now, no one likes instability. No one likes demonstrations every day, because in the end, it's exhausting. But what's the alternative for the person who has only 1 meal a day and maybe half a meal a day in the future? The answer is that, as Roger was pointing out, in terms of these semi-Soviets or these organized groups, there is enough food in Sri Lanka to feed all the population. The problem is that it's entirely unequal, and that no one is guaranteed at the bottom to getting 3 meals a day or even 2 meals a day. So we have to fight in a transitional way for those safety nets, the so-called safety nets of the IMF, or whatever the language is, that there has to be an immediate cash grant to every community, every household in the country. That is a minimum demand, and it has to be put forward. I think we need to develop that in a program. If the IMF is saying there has to be a social safety net of cash grants, because that's now the most economical way of doing it now, the bourgeois found out from Brazil and Mexico and elsewhere, is to give everyone 10, instead of saying, well, you could earn 10 Rand a day, to give people $10 a day, to give people $10 a day. But why should it be just $10? Why shouldn't it be $30? In other words, we have to put transitional demands from below, especially on the distribution of food. We cannot have people starving to death to get the IMF into give its loan, and then to impose austerity is already unbelievable. So now we're going to have more austerity. It's beyond imagination. And that's why the question of workers' power is posed. And the comrades have a very difficult job at this time of fighting clarity on the left, that we cannot be sucked into this vacuum of the bourgeois power and to end up supporting bourgeois power of a tyrannical nature, because these Bonapartist measures, as Roger has made, have been honed in war. It's not as though they just pay Bonapartes just having a game and then going away. They're building up a state apparatus of repression. And maybe comrades could come back to the question that Poems raised about the attitude of the police and the army at the base, because we can see that if they manage to get full control over the army, then that definitely will be used against the people. And the interventions that we've seen so far, will be, well, a light touch as compared to, what's coming in the future. I won't say any more about that. I had more to say about the nature of Bonapartism in terms of the crisis, because of the crazy policies that Gotha has implemented. So anyway, but I'll leave that. Maybe we need to have a further discussion online and elsewhere to take it forward. But let's look at this question of how do we organize and what kind of program are we putting for the people when absolute misery is the only prediction for what we see in Sri Lanka. Sorry for going on a bit. Stephen, would you like to come in?
Okay, yeah. Well, I think both David and prior to David, Teva Krishnan, have pointed to a real danger, which is the danger of counter-revolution. Gotabaya's natural form of politics is the army and the coup and suppression and blood in the streets. That is what he assumes is going to be necessary. I think it's quite likely that the parliamentary games with Ranil Wickremesinghe and the rest of them are a prelude to trying to regularize the situation in order to impose possibly martial law or an even more dictatorial police state. Because he also sees what we can see, that there is no simple way out of this under capitalism. It can only be done by forced extraction of surplus value. And I think that's why the situation is urgent, but I don't think we advance our cause very far by saying that it's simple. The basic ideas of trade unionism are simple, but if we look at the reality of trade unionism in Sri Lanka, at first sight, it sounds really good that 2,000 trade unions called a general strike. But the fact of the matter is that nearly all of those 2,000 unions are tiny and completely ineffective, even as trade unions, never mind as leading the working class in insurrection. So the need to, in the context of developing and really serious crisis, we do have to put forward forms of working class organization, within which we will argue for measures of control. And that, I think, is the key point, that workers' control is the backbone of any transitional program, advancing the ability of the workers themselves to take control of their situation. And I think that is what we have to focus on wherever we can have the opportunity to speak directly to the workers and to the trade unions and community organizations. So it's not a matter of counterposing the norms of trade unionism. It is a matter of developing them in their natural pattern, because what we really need is not 2,000 tiny little trade unions. What we need is mass-based trade unions, preferably industrial unions, within which we will argue for those unions to form the basis of a workers' party. And in the workers' party, we will argue for a transitional program, we'll argue for control measures, we'll argue for workers' defense against the likely crackdown from Gotabaya. and so on. But whilst it is very simple to say all those things, and I'm sure everybody here understands them and probably agrees with them, but it isn't simple to implement. But the first requirement is that you say it and all argue for it and organize for it. And I think that's the task facing small groups of revolutionaries in Sri Lanka. No one's suggesting that they've got it easy. On the contrary, it's a very tall order. But discussions like this are beneficial and can advance things and allow comrades to share ideas and clarify how best to fight for them. So thanks to everybody for organizing it.
Thank you for your points, Stephen. Further contributions. We had some concrete questions, Saranapala, from Pam and me to some extent, on the attitude of the troops and the police. I wondered if you could reflect on that in a response.
Yes. Now you know that the general changed his position. You know that in the army, the week ago, he removed his position, the chief of the army, and appointed another post that the staff officer or something like that. And as well as when he you know that he had a farewell in the army, and he made a speech. He said, but it depends on the forces, I think. But however, he announced there won't be the military government. No base for the military government. And all the troops are your cousins, neighbors, and friends. So we do not want to organize them against you. So that was the speech he made. So it says, but we don't know what will happen in the, you know, that the barbaric situation arise the people. But, and also, as far as I concern personally, in this situation also that we had one demonstration, the entrance of the parliament, you know, that 3 weeks ago. There were 5,000, the most probably the students were organized, it's the Intercampuses Union Federation. And there were 5,000 the participants. And actually the police 2-3 times aimed to the tear gas, you know, that for the students. And lot of tear gas they made outside. You know that because of they try to show their friendship for the audience. So I noticed it, and we discussed, but I noticed it, and there was no effect from those tear gas can, because they used it out of the crowd, and also sometimes some army people, so they are who are controlling the queues in the country. The now army fellows are there, but they are friendly, try to solve the problem. No to use assault or something. And also they got to understand the thing, you know, that the last 5 years ago, that before they came to the power, that Rajapaksa regime, so the army made an open fire one place, and 2 died in the area because of they need a pure water struggle. And also as same the free trade zone also, that police opened fire and 1 worker died, the Roshan Chanaka. So that, but this period, but however, the Gota did not use police and army like that way, because he tries always to keep army and police the settle minded, because that was the thing. So it's still not sure that they are moving to the military government or the police and military government. There is no sign, but it depends on the situation in the coming period, I think.
Okay, many thanks. Other comrades coming in to contribute?
Dominic has indicated.
Okay, please come in, Dominic.
Yeah, it's not a fully worked out thing, but I think this question of taking power, I think you've got to turn it on its head and say why we're taking power. And I think if you're going to unite the working class and other sections of society, you've got to put some very basic and fundamental demands on the leadership. You've got to start saying, if we can feed ourselves with the food we've got now, why aren't we? Why aren't we rationing the food? Why aren't we, workers and other organisations demanding control over the distribution of that food? That we can't trust the present leadership. The present leadership have led us into this crisis. And those people who are now flocking into supporting the present leadership, whether the trade unions or socialists or so-called left-wingers or what have you, you've got to say all they're interested in is the status quo of maintaining their positions. They're not fighting for the working class. They're not fighting in the interests of the rest of the people. And I think it's a bit fuzzy what I'm saying, I think, but I think if you can't put a full program out and say we want to do this, we want to do that, and what do the other. I mean, Lenin was peace, bread and land. And I think that's the sort of thing you've got to grab people's attention and say, this is what we want. Some basic demands of saying, what's the practical solutions the workers want? If they're starving, they want food. If they're poor, they want money or the means of acquiring things. If they want, you've got to wrap it up in that sort of thing and worry about all the technicalities and details once you're starting on the march. Because the working class will come up with the solutions. We've not got to lay out a map that they've got to follow. The working class have always come up with the solutions. The idea of Soviets wasn't something that theoreticians developed. It was something that the workers developed. So I think that's my sort of rough sort of thing, that you've got to put forward something for people to get behind and to unite behind and see that they need all sections of society who are exploited by the capitalists to join together, within
that. Thanks, Dominic. I'm pleased to see that we have Comrade Noor Kamal who's living in Bangladesh and gives something more of a regional participation. Other comrades who do not speak now or normally in our discussions are welcome to come in. Well, comrades, if there are no further contributions, and we've had a few double contributions from comrades, which we have entertained, to step up the debate. But maybe we would ask Saranapala if you'd like to come in and lead this discussion to a conclusion. PD, would you like to come in?
Yeah, the discussion was fruitful. All the comrades' contribution is valuable contribution to consider. Then our task is how do we build the proper organization to face the recent future. So that was the task and challenge for us to do that. So, however, based on our the minutes which made Comrade Roger, the excellent proposal, and so how we are trying to mobilize based on that, because the the organization now we are working, the Socialist People's Forum. So we are not a majority. We are the small group in the organization, but we distributed and shared the documents among them, but they agreed, and also they did not made any comment. This is the revolutionary program, and it's okay. The thing is now always they are trying to emphasize the situation of the trade unions and trade union leaders and the left party leaders. So they are not saying, and if we put forward in the discussion, sometimes it may be the minimum agreement maybe collapse, because this is our program. Therefore, we are trying to mobilize the rank and file workers in the country. Mainly that our tactic and our task. So we are trying to mobilize the rank and files of the trade unions who were reformist and who were reformist, and make their members mislead in the struggle. So, however, I think our assessment is, so if the crisis will come more than that, so maybe a lot of problems, and all the leaders maybe they can't reply to the workers in the future. And other way, so if they win, if they win means, if the government dissolved and is going to have an election, also the opposition or the government party can't maintain the country, because the crisis started, and they don't know what will happen, and they don't know solutions, and again will come the crisis in front of us, and we have a lot of work, without getting rest or without getting tired. We want to work much work, because it's a very clear perspective with us, but none others. So they are trying to keep up under their control and under their hand, but we don't think that they can do it. So it will collapse, and the workers will come to the streets again. So that is the short-term perspective as we predict.
Okay, thanks very much for those points. Can I say we've been really pleased to have a number. Pam, did you want to come in now?
I'm just applauding.
So that's a big hand of applause, and from us all too. But maybe we should conclude by saying that there's more work to be done, and we look forward to engaging with you, Saranapala, on the basis of that statement, and refining it if necessary, taking it forward, and maybe to pick up the point that Dominic made, which was in relation to the most immediate demands of the workers. For instance, how do we answer workers who are absolutely starving to death? We also have to do something. We have to put pressure on local authorities, on whatever agencies there are, not for welfare, but on the basis of worker solidarity, to share the little that we have, which is what poor people do, to make sure that all of us, survive together. And then out of that, maybe we have to develop the transitional demands to show what's possible. If we had power, we'd reorganize the distribution of food. What power we have, we at least at the local area must do something. to be able to ensure the survival of working people and poor working people, particularly, at this time. So look forward to having exchange and articles and on the Brink and elsewhere in the Facebook and so forth. We're following it on a day-to-day basis with you. So thank you very much. Roger, I don't know if you'd like to come in with some announcements.
Yes, well, comrades, today we were discussing a country in absolute convulsions, and we heard from an experienced veteran socialist activist and trade unionist. And we'll do the same next week for another country which is in absolutely dire convulsions, economic, political, and social, called the USA. We have the veteran activist and trade unionist comrade Jack Gerson will be leading off. So I look forward to seeing you all, and I hope other comrades too next week.
Okay, thanks, Roger. I think that brings our discussion to a conclusion. Applause, to Comrade Rajapaksa and to other comrades that have participated. We want to follow closely and participate closely with you, even though we're afar. We're thinking of you, and we want to hone up all our political discussions to bring the working class to power in Sri Lanka and elsewhere. Thank you.